Kia ora and welcome. My name is Ellen Rose and this is the Creative Cure to Boredom. I've created this channel to share and explore some inventive ideas to art using everyday materials you can find in your own home. The hope is that it makes the current lockdown and isolation situation just a little bit more bearable. So today I'm going to have a bit of a play with using butter as a sculpting medium. So this is turning butter to busts. All you'll need is a block of butter, some waxproof paper to keep your bench a bit tidy, and a spoon, knife, and a skewer if you've got one. Hope you enjoy. Cheers! So I've decided to do a bust of the New Zealand comedian Jemaine Clement. So what I've done here is I've just printed out a couple photos of him. So front on and side on. Ideally you'd have lots of different photos so you could get lots of different angles. And I'm just doing a really basic grid. The pictures are roughly about the same proportion. So it gives me a bit of an idea of how to cut into the butter using this grid technique. So I'll get a basic cutout first and then I'll start going in and actually sculpting details. So I'm counting the grid as I go to make sure I'm cutting into the right part of the grid. But because the butter is obviously melting, it is smudging along the way. So it is making it slightly confusing as I go. So I do have to keep counting to make sure I've got it right. And actually when I did my initial cuts on the left side of the butter, they were incorrect. So I'm just going back and cutting back into it again. And so now I'm going to turn it on the side and same thing. I'm going to carve into it to get the rough basic shape first, and then I'll work in the sculpting techniques on top of that. And I would suggest when you're trying to build up again more, it is quite easy to add the butter back on to build it up. I'd suggest putting more on than you need so you can always carve back into it rather than having to add small bits continuously. And I did make the mistake of trying to go with some detail earlier on, whereas you'll see I smudge over the top of these details that I'm starting to put in now as I go on. So I'm finding because my fingers are quite warm, I'm melting the butter with my touch, which is frustrating when I want the butter to be quite hard, but it is actually quite useful when I'm wanting to smooth off the surface. And you can see I'm trying to find different ways to use the tools that I've got. So the end of the spoon, as in the end that you hold the spoon with, I'm finding quite good for smoothing over. The skewer I'm finding quite good to sort of navigate some of those smaller details. And the knife I probably used the least. It was a little bit big for the size of the bust that I was doing. So you can see I'm trying to build up around the eye and the nose. And whilst it might not look like it from that camera angle, I'm actually constantly moving to the side to look at the side to check it against the picture that I've got there as a reference material. And the reason why I printed two of each picture was that sometimes when you put a grid over the top, it can distort the way that you look at it as well. So to make sure I didn't lose any features, I wanted a clear photo reference as well. So I'm constantly looking back at that when I'm adding things to the face. Now, towards the end of this sculpting, I actually put the bust into the fridge because I felt like it was getting a little bit too melted. And to be honest with you, if I'd have put the bust in the fridge at this stage, it would have been really helpful as well. I think you can see by the video that the more I'm touching it, the more it's melting and it's getting quite warm on the surface. So it's just sort of smushing around the place rather than being a nice sort of solid medium like clay. So I'm making sure that I get some definition around the eye sockets and definition of the jawline. Initially I had the jawline a little bit too forward on the head, so I'm just making sure that I brought that back, making sure that I give a nice defined chin. And the eyebrows, I really wanted that raised eyebrow in that bottom photograph. So I'm trying to work into the forehead to articulate one eyebrow down, one eyebrow up, and that real accentuated brow that he has. So you'll see I'm working on top of waxproof paper. I've just taped it down to the table with some green tape. This is to stop both the butter from smearing everywhere all over the table, but also to stop my figure from adhering to the table as well. So it'll make it easier to take it off and put it in the fridge to chill it up and get it nice and hard. So I am actually going to put it in the fridge now, and while it's in the fridge, I'll just make some little glasses out of some cut butter, and I'll also go back into it once I get it out of the fridge with a skewer. So this is the final result. As you can see, it looks somewhat like Jemaine Clement's. I wouldn't say it looks exactly like Jemaine Clement's, but it certainly does look like a man. So you can see I've gone back into it and added some glasses with just some cold butter cut into strips. And I've also gone into the eyebrows, the nose and the mouth, as well as the chin with the skewer again, just to add a couple of last minute indentations. So overall, it was a really fun process, and I think it came out relatively well. But it does melt very quickly, so putting it in the fridge intermittently I think is a pretty good idea. Anyway, I would love to hear what you've done with this similar sort of process, if you have any comments or suggestions. So please do leave your comments below. I would love to hear them. I hope you've enjoyed the video. This has been the Creative Cure to Boredom with Ellen Rose. Till next time, ngā mihi nui.